I'm Deirdre Wilson. Welcome to Out of the Blue. This is a show on animals, the environment, and spirituality. What I call positive television for the betterment of the planet. I've been doing this show for many years on cable TV, and now we're bringing it to the internet. And this is my very first show. And I've chosen someone very special for this show, photographer and conservation activist Robert Glenn Ketchum. He is going to be my first guest today because we want to talk about the seriousness of the possible construction of a pebble mine in Bristol Bay, Alaska. Robert Glenn Ketchum has been described by Robert Kennedy Jr. as one of the leading heroes of the environmental movement, and Audubon magazine has included him in their list of 100 people who shaped the environmental movement in the 20th century. So now I'd like to welcome Robert Glenn Ketchum.
Thank you. It's nice to be here with you. I shared some of your television shows with you, so it's fun to be first guest on your internet show.
I think it's been like 15 years since we've done a show together.
It has.
And I'm so glad that we're together today to talk about these issues. But I want to go back a little bit, talk about your humble beginnings first, just to give people a little background on you. And I was surprised to read that you had started out shooting rock bands like The Doors and Cream and Hendrix on Sunset Strip. How did that lead you? When did you get involved in the environment and start caring about the environment and make that transition?
I think in high school, I had read Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. I read Aldo Leopold's Sand County Almanac. And so as sort of academic pursuit, I was aware of the discourse around our environment and the way we behave within it.
Now, this issue that has been brought to my consciousness about building a pebble mine in Bristol Bay, Alaska. Tell me exactly what they're planning to do and where they're planning to do it.
Well, can I give you a kind of setting?
Because we will, show pictures and so forth, but...
No, but let me give you a setting so that the listeners can really understand. Bristol Bay is an area called Southwest, and it's so anonymous that there's only 2 towns out there. There are less than 5,000 people, and there's only about 150 miles of road, which in an area larger than the size of Washington State is like nothing.
Right.
So the human imprint on this place is very, very small, and it's mostly a truly wild habitat. Caribou, wolves, bear, eagles,
seals,
more fish than you can possibly imagine. Hundreds of lakes and rivers, hundreds of lakes and rivers. And in a state that's endowed with parks, national parks, amazing national parks, Southwest has the lion's share. There's 2 national parks, Katmai and Lake Clark. Then there's 3 national wildlife refuges, and there's 4 state parks, among them Wood-Tikchik, one of the biggest state parks in all of North America, 1.6 million acres. I mean, that's almost incomprehensible in the lower 48.
Right.
So you have this extraordinary, completely wild, undisrupted habitat, and the state legislature, which is very pro-development, has allowed a Canadian mining corporation to stake and begin to explore claims, not only just in the generic area of all these beautiful parks and everything, but quite literally in the headwaters of 2 of the most productive salmon rivers in the history of the world. The Bristol Bay salmon fishery is the most productive, least impaired commercial fishery on the planet,
right,
bar none. I mean, nobody else has got a fishery that equals this, and never has. It's an extraordinary one. It's very well managed. It produces a huge catch of wild salmon, but then there's also herring and other populations that are harvested.
And what they want to do is cut off the top of a mountain, build there, and then some of the toxic copper and so forth can come down, get in the water, and can kill the salmon.
They're not. This isn't a mountain cut. That's more Appalachian style. This is an open pit copper mine. So they're just going to start at ground level, and they're just going to go down 2,000 feet into the ground in a series of concentric circles. Now, that may be a good idea, except in a place like this, the water table is literally at the surface. And when the listeners look at the photographs, they'll see how aqueous the surface is. So from the very first shovel full of dirt that they take out,
right,
water is going to rush in.
Right.
And the entire time the mine is being constructed, 2,000 feet down in and 2 miles across,
right,
water is going to be pouring in. as they extract the minerals, they're going to be introducing cyanide to leach out the gold.
Right.
And they're going to have the water interacting with iron and other
Copper.
metals. And then that water interaction causes toxic solutions. So all the water being pumped out is now going to have become toxic because of the minerals
Right.
exposure to the water
And
element.
then it runs down into the streams, correct?
Well, what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to contain it in 20 square miles of lagoons that'll need in perpetuity maintenance, which is pretty unlikely. And if you really want to see how big Alaskans think about this kind of stuff, the lagoons will require earthen dams larger than the Three Rivers Gorges dams in China.
But the water will be polluted. That's
Highly
in those
polluted,
lagoons.
and it has to be.
So what's the good of having these lagoons that are just polluted? They don't know what to do with the water, right?
That's right. And so and what's worse is it's in perpetuity. You can't clean up the cyanide. It doesn't go away.
It doesn't
doesn't break down. So these lagoons will be
Like
there
styrofoam,
forever,
plastic,
spread out.
yeah.
They'll be there forever, spread out over these 20 square miles. Well, in one of the most seismically active areas in the world, held back by only earthen dams, and in an area where sometimes you have torrential rains, how long do you think it's going to be before there is an accidental spill?
Right.
And then, yes, then it goes into the groundwater, then it goes into the rivers, then it goes into the lake systems, then you start to contaminate the entire connected habitat.
So this threatens the wildlife.
Threatens
it threatens the people that live there because they make their living
Yes.
through these fisheries.
Yes,
Right?
yes. Threatens the native population, the native villages. There's more than 25 native villages spread out across
And the
this
people
landscape.
that live there, they realize how detrimental this would be, and they are trying to stop it, correct?
Most of them do. I hesitate to speak for the Alaskans as a generic whole, but there is a coalition, a very unusual coalition that brings together environmentalists and hunters, who would ever believe that one, who are uniformly united against doing this. And actually, when we traveled my exhibition about this and took it to Fairbanks, which is a mining-based Alaskan city, we had a lot of miners in the audience who wanted to have a dialogue about this because they want to see mining developed in Alaska.
Because they want,
And
they figure
it's
a lot of
jobs.
money, jobs.
It's jobs,
exactly.
absolutely. There's no doubt about it, and jobs is one of the factor. And I said, where in the equation do you think America's going to realize any money out of this? It's a Canadian company. They're going to bring in their own workers. The money is going out of the country. The gold is going out of the country to a British investment firm called Gilead, whose primary stock investors are Saudi Arabians and Chinese gold speculators.
Who are the people that are doing this exactly?
The consortium behind Northern Dynasty, which is the group proposing to build the Pebble Mine, involves Rio Tinto out of South America, Anglo American, which is a Canadian group, Gilead, a British investment firm. It's very international. This is
Now, just so the audience knows, NRDC is the Natural Resource Defense
Natural Resources
Defense Council, and they are the organization that is working very hard with their attorneys and so forth to prevent this from happening.
They're one of the groups. The coalition, Patagonia is on board now. It's a Patagonia campaign directive to all the Patagoniacs all over the world. Patagonia being with clothing, the outdoor clothing manufacturer
Right,
that
of
I'm
course,
referring
yeah.
to. But there are, major fishing industrial groups that are part of the fisheries resources of Alaska. There are native coalitions that are part of the native tribal groups. There are white hunting associations that don't want to see the caribou driven off the landscape. Everybody has their own reasons for being there, but nobody likes the mine.
Right.
And that's the unusual beauty of this particular coalition. I've been doing conservation advocacy work for a long time, and our partners are usually the same friends. And in this particular case, we have very unusual partners that have never necessarily held hands with each other
Which is
before.
great.
Which is fantastic.
Now, I understand several big name jewelers have already signed a pledge not to buy the gold from
Yeah.
the Pebble Mine, which is Zale, Ziffany, Hellsberg Diamonds,
Yeah.
which are big companies.
Yeah.
So they obviously do care about the environment and are taking
they have
action.
pledged that there will be no dirty gold or blood diamonds. All those corporations have agreed to not buy dirty gold and not buy blood diamonds.
Okay. And in
Diamonds coming out of Africa.
Okay.
Lest they
right.
construe that there's diamonds in this mine.
Right.
There are not.
Which would be interesting.
Yeah.
I hope not.
No.
In 2010, the Obama administration withdrew Bristol Bay from the oil and gas lease consideration. So does that mean that they cannot drill there, and for how long?
What had happened was, for many years, I think 18, Bristol Bay, because of its rich resource as a fishery, it's a multi-million, maybe even approaching $1 billion a year renewable industry, had been considered by both Republicans and Democrats to be more valuable for fish than for the marginal amount of oil and gas that had been identified in the mid-bay subsurface soils. In the let's go for broke Bush Jr. presidency, when they opened up every piece of federal property that they could possibly give away to the corporate entities, they broke the bipartisan agreement and opened up Bristol Bay to oil and gas leases. The oil and gas leases were so minimal that 50% of the principal companies didn't even bid on them. And so there were whole tracts that never even got taker offers. And it was rather pointless, and no big company, even the ones who did bid, were going to go in and invest in it. They just took the bids because they were available. So when the Obama administration came back in, they simply canceled the leases and put Bristol Bay back into its status as a protected fishery.
And how long do you think that will be?
Well, there are those of us in the coalition that want to see it put into permanent marine reserve protected status. And for the time being, I think during whatever is left of the Obama years, whether that's two or another term, I think we'll be fine. The richer oil and gas reserves are clearly on the North Slope and the Arctic, and in the deep waters, for however you may want to view that, given the BP spill. But Bristol Bay just is not one of those reserves. So I don't know that it's as targetable, and I don't know that it's on any gas company's #1 priority list. There are plenty of other places.
But everything could change in an election.
If we get somebody, absolutely, we get somebody like Newt Gingrich in there who